The agenda is set. Hello, everyone. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. Turning up the speed of socialism. Hugo Chavez wins again in Venezuela and promises more for the people. He may have his economic fingers crossed. That and more on my agenda. It's time to talk. Voters gave him a fourth term as president. He says he'll give them more of the country's wealth. How will he do that without setting off several ticking economic time bombs? Well, you won't find cheering crowds in Iran this week. There is an uneasy calm in the country, and the people are angry at their leader. President Ahmadinejad being blamed for economic mismanagement. Protesters and police clashed last week as the country's currency continued its collapse. What is next? And if you have not noticed, the number of senior citizens just keeps getting bigger, and the United Nations says we are all in denial. A new report says that governments everywhere are ignoring the needs and the resources of grandma and grandpa. Well, today we take off those blinders and we consider the good in all of that gray. Well, I've invited three people today to talk, argue, and pry apart these headlines. Now, my first guest says that the future for older people is pretty grim right now. Fewer jobs, smaller pensions, and feeling not very needed. Doesn't sound very good. I'm happy to welcome Laura Romeu. She spends every day researching the economics of aging with the German Center of Gerontology. Laura, is it simply becoming too expensive for the world to have so many elderly people?
Yeah, it is. I mean, at least it's becoming very expensive in the developing countries, and it will become very, very expensive for the developed countries, and it will become very expensive for the developing countries if they don't react to these demographic changes.
All right, we're going to talk about the cost of all these changes in just a moment. My second guest has a direct line to scores of Iranian refugees who have fled their home country and come to Germany. Hayo Funke is one of the most prominent members of the Iranian Refugee Assistance Association. He's a familiar face also here on Agenda. He teaches political science at the Free University here in Berlin. Hayo, you know the politics, you know the people of Iran. What should we be thinking when we hear reports of riots in Tehran aimed at the leadership?
We should take them serious, as we should have done in 2009 and did. And now the crisis is there, a financial crisis, due to the sanctions of the West and of the EU.
All right, we're going to talk about what could possibly happen next in just a second. And my next guest says that Hugo Chavez's election victory was small enough that the president will now have to consider the middle class and not just the poor. I'm happy to welcome to the show Dario Azzellini. He is a political scientist, he's a writer, he's a filmmaker who splits his time between Berlin and Caracas. Dario, economics, the big topic today on the show. Can Chavez afford to deliver all the goods that he is promising?
I think it's possible concerning the social programs, welfare, living quality, education, etc. If the big question is if he can manage the economic transformation of the country away from an economy just based on oil, but that's not just a question of Chavez only.
Exactly. Well, we're going to talk about his strategy in just a few moments. You know, during his re-election campaign, Hugo Chavez promised voters more 21st century socialism, but he may soon be preoccupied with some very capitalistic chores. Economists expect Chavez will have to devalue Venezuela's currency next year to manage a ballooning public debt. Now, that means buying power for everyone will shrink, and as we know, the poor will feel that most. Now, there are some tough times ahead for Venezuela, but people are still more in the present than the future.
Many Venezuelans lionize Hugo Chavez. Re-elected for a fourth term of office, he's expected to continue building what he calls 21st century socialism there. He's pumped the country's income from oil into many programs for the poor, one reason for his popularity.
You voted for socialism. You voted for independence. You voted for the greatness of Venezuela.
Supporters of opposition candidate Enrique Capriles were devastated. He proved to be a tough opponent, garnering around 45% of the vote, something he said should give the president food for thought.
I hope a political movement that has been in power for 14 years now understands that almost half of the country does not agree with it.
With Hugo Chavez at its helm for 6 more years, is Venezuela ready to face its economic and social problems?
Dario, what would you say? Is Chavez, is he ready for a rough road?
Venezuela has had a rough road during the last 14 years, different coup attempts by the opposition. The candidate of the opposition participated in a military coup or an intended military coup against Chavez. He had strikes by entrepreneurs, strikes or lockouts, attacks internationally. So Venezuela has always had rough times politically and economically during the last 12 years, and even so a quite good performance. Actually, the first 9 months of this year, the growth has been around nearly 5%. It has quite stable financial situation. It handles debts like European countries used to do before debts skyrocketed in Europe. So it's about 25% of the internal production.
Okay, but the economists are saying that next year the currency is going to have to be devalued. And that is definitely going to take a big bite into the buying power of everybody in the country. How is he going to sell that?
On one hand, it depends what kind of economists you read. Economists have been saying that the Venezuelan economy is crushing during the last 12 years, and it's a country with the best economic performance in Latin America. There might be a devaluation, but there have been devaluations before, like about 2 years ago, and one of the answers was that all the minimum wages and wages of people in the country working for the state rose about the same amount that the devaluation was. Measures of price control were introduced and strengthened, and that lowered, for example, the inflation during the last 12 months down to 16%. It was 25% last year.
So are you saying then you think that there will be no tremendous economic challenges coming up in the next year? Do you think is that all coming from north of the border?
Well, we have an economic crisis and a structural crisis that obviously can cause economic turmoil all around the world, and it's not in Venezuela's hands, for example, to control the oil prices. That is the main product Venezuela is exporting. So it's a difficult answer to give. But if I look at the performance, the economic performance, the financial situation of Venezuela, it's much better off than European countries, than the U.S. or many other countries.
Well, I mean, I don't know that. I mean, Venezuela kind of it feels like it's an addict. I mean, they have the oil, and they get most of their revenue from the oil. I mean, they are an economy that is dependent on one resource. The critics around the world, from all schools of economics, complain that Chavez is not taking the money that's coming in from all of those oil cells and helping to diversify the economy. Is he guilty of that? Is he guilty of not planning for the future?
On one hand, I think that they are diversifying the economy. They boosted internal production. They have agreements with Argentina, with Ukraine, with Russia, China, etc., built hundreds of factories, try to diversify an economy, but it's also until you're in a capitalist economy and you're dependent on prices, etc. It's not just your own decision if you can really manage to diversify the economy, or if the pressure is that high that you might not reach it. But on the other hand, I would say it depends also what we intend as investing into the future. Venezuela has boosted its university system. Venezuela is now one of the 10 countries in the world with the highest university population, like relatively to their all-in-all population. I would think that's one of the best investments in the future.
But there's no incentive to get away from oil, though, is there, in Venezuela? I mean, I think any government would love to be in that situation where you're bringing in tons of money by selling this resource, and you lose the incentive then to diversify. The Russians could talk about this for weeks. They know how that is, and Mr. Chavez loves to be everyone's darling. I mean, he's a political animal. He loves populism, and my question is, where is the incentive going to come from for him to take this economy and to start creating structural changes that will help Venezuela when the oil runs out?
Well, actually, at the oil production rate right now, the oil will run out in 212 years in Venezuela. It has the biggest oil reserves of the world. But that's not the point. Venezuela is at the same time diversifying, is setting up a local production. It has built... It's investing a lot, for example, in IT. It founded 2 free software academies together with Stallman and is producing a lot in computer programs. It acquired knowledge with China how to build satellites. It sent 2 satellites into the atmosphere and into the orbit, and has now a team of more than 90 Venezuelan engineers able to build satellites. It has
I mean, that's a long list. I mean, there are lots of people who would say, I mean, there are these examples. Jairo, let me pull you in and ask you about the criticisms of there not being much transparency in the political system under Chavez. Is there an incentive for Chavez to change that?
I think I agree in what he's saying, but there's opposition. And they have the parliament, and they try to control, and it's necessary because there's an authoritarian side in Chavez's behavior, of course, by the others also, with the coup d'etat approaches. With respect to the economy, I would just add that more can be done in infrastructure, more can be done to get a tax system that helps to interact people and presidency, executive, and the people. And this is the problem in all that oil revenue countries, kind of rentier state mentality. We have the money, we will give it. But it would be better to have a tax system so they have their own, reference system, the interactiveness between people and presidents.
Yeah, I mean, Chavez loves this cult of personality, too. I mean, he has been very open about his battle with cancer, trying to build on the sympathies that he has with people. Is there any reason, then, for him to change his policies when he thinks there are no exterior forces that are going to force me to do anything?
He said something about changes with respect to technology, with university system. This is along the line what I meant. More infrastructure, not only oil, and they're better off compared to Iran, for example, with the same amount of oil, basically.
Is there anything the international community should expect from Chavez that has not been
to ask for peace in the region, especially with Colombia and the FARC rebels? If they can agree upon a balanced solution, that would be a good thing for Venezuela, and especially for the Colombian situation, for example.
And Dario, you had also said that if Chavez had lost, it would actually have been a destabilizing effect for the region.
Yeah, definitely. I think that actually almost all countries, maybe apart from Paraguay and Honduras, that used to cooperate with Venezuela until there have been coups d'etat that were supported by parties and governments in the north. So it's more what can Venezuela ask from the rest of the world, and especially from the north and the other way around. But I think that almost every other country is happy about Venezuela and about Chavez winning the elections. Chavez has been one of the most important statesmen pushing the Latin American integration, a project where Argentina and Brazil even if their political differences, are strongly with Chavez, and both spoke before the elections and after and welcomed the victory of Chavez. The process of continental integration in Latin America during the last 10 years has been probably one of the most dynamic and interesting processes of integration that we saw around the world, and it changed the position of Latin America. Latin America is becoming a global player in politics, in economics, etc.
Do you see Chavez using this term? One could argue that it may be his last term, to maybe solidify his legacy in the country? I mean, do we have a politician? Are we looking at a politician now who wants to become the statesman that people remember?
I think he already is. I think that is not the problem. And the question about the cult around his person is sincerely a problem. But I think it's a very contradictory situation in a sense that Chavez, on the other side, always tried also to go against it. For example, it's forbidden to build any statues of Chavez. It's forbidden for any politician to make campaigns with photos of Chavez without his explicit permission, for example. And things like that. Yeah. At the same time, he is a person that people love.
Yeah,
he's a star, and he can connect in a way to people that other presidents or politicians can't.
Before we move on, I wanted to ask Laura, he is pumping lots of money into social programs, and is that a model? The rest of the world, you hear, especially in Europe or in North America, you hear that we don't have the money for the social programs now. Is Chavez, is he sitting in a I guess a privileged position right now?
Yeah. Well, of course, I mean, we need to talk about how efficient are all these investments at the end. But I agree with Dario that this investment in education is the best you can do for the country. Of course, you need to give the opportunities after that for the young populations who are well educated to have a good economy to spend their opportunities. But this direction, this investment in education, is definitely good. Also for this generation when they grow old. I mean, if they manage to have a good education, a good integration in a regulated labor market with a good pension system, it's the best aging politic that you can have. So yeah. I think it's a good thing to do.
All right, we're going to get back to those policies in just a second. We want to switch gears for a second. If you talk to merchants in the Iranian capital Tehran about what's on their mind today, they will tell you they're thinking about tomorrow and their inability to plan for it. The riots that broke out last week were because the country's currency lost a third of its value in just 10 days. Inflation is already running 25%. And worried folks are trying to convert their savings into U.S. dollars. Now, this is a mess in the making, and the people are blaming their leaders.
Iran's currency has fallen to a record low, and this amateur footage is said to show merchants there who closed their stores in protest. They are angry over the falling rial and the crackdown on money traders. Police allegedly used tear gas to break up the demonstrations. Critics accuse Iran's president Mahmoud Ahmadinejad of pushing monetary policies that are hurting the country. And as the situation worsens, dissatisfaction with the regime has been growing louder. Are the sanctions imposed because of Iran's nuclear program really beginning to take their toll? Ahmadinejad says the country will ride it out and blames Iran's enemies for the collapse in its currency. Inflation is high. Meat and milk are becoming increasingly expensive, while vegetables have doubled in price. In 2009, protests rocked the country in the wake of the presidential elections that saw Ahmadinejad stay in the job. How will Tehran react to more unrest?
How do you expect Tehran to react if there is more unrest?
With harsh reactions like in 2009, there is no, it's sorry to say, no change in that behavior.
But is it that simple? Because the economic situation right now is not the way it was in 2009.
Right. They have to do more. Of course, and the crisis is serious because now it's not only students or others who do protest because of a political issue, but a basic economic issue because we have a deep financial crisis because of the sanctions, because of the inner inconsistencies of the economic policy.
What do you think is happening here? These protests, these riots that we saw, the merchants were not blaming the West, which we usually hear from the leadership in Tehran. They were blaming their own leaders. Why is it this time that they're pointing the finger at their own people?
Even more, 60% and more saying, okay, change your foreign policy that we can come out of this deadlock.
Do you think these riots that we've seen, are they a sign that the sanctions against Iran are working? Is that what we're seeing here, that the slow process of imposing sanctions, waiting for these sanctions to take effect, are we now seeing the first fruits of those sanctions?
This is due to a high degree to the sanctions and the speeding up of the sanctions. They even want to do more, if I get it right. The EU want to sanction also a gas transfer and maybe United States also. And this is related to the nuclear issue, but indirectly also to the authoritarian way how they put down the protest of 2009.
I know you have a lot of contact with refugees who have come to Germany from Iran. And are they seeing what we're seeing right now as a sign of hope?
I doubt it, because this is an economic crisis and we don't know how the government will react to that. They hope for more freedom and less human rights violations, because this was the reason why they have to flee, to get out of the country. They were traumatized by rape and others, very, very serious human rights violations. So we have, as Germany and other countries, have to take care of them. So they don't know if that goes in a good direction, that the government is more flexible in economic terms, in international terms, and with respect with respect to the people themselves. They have less to buy because they have no money. So at least they have to address it. And maybe by this indirect reaction, the government will get more flexible, hopefully.
There is a lot of chatter going on right now about this currency crisis being much worse than what we can see right now. The IMF saying, I think it was at the end of last year, that the central bank in Tehran had enough foreign currency reserves to fund the country for 2 years, if need be. We don't know now what the foreign currency reserve situation is, but what we do know is that since the currency has fallen, the central bank has not moved to prop up the currency. And that is a troubling sign if you're in the political leadership there.
Yeah, that's by any reason a disastrous situation. If the currency is breaking away within the country, we have a kind of more than economic depression. So it's the most serious sign you can have. Either they hide the money, we don't know, or they haven't the money. If they haven't the money, they have to come soon with a political and economic solution out of that crisis, because that will be deepened, and then we don't know the future of the next 12 months.
There is an idea that has been circulated in Washington for the U.S., for example, to set up a system where Iranian citizens can transfer their savings into American accounts and have them protected there in case the currency plummets, and having independent agencies facilitate that. What do you make of that?
Crazy things, because that deepens the economic and political crisis then in Iran, and it's kind of an intervention into the economic internal things.
Well, we're doing that anyway, though, with the sanctions.
Yeah, but in a more direct way. So I can't foresee what the result will be.
You know, when people try to make sense of what's going on in Iran right now, obviously, you know, the big elephant in the room is the nuclear program.
Yes.
And where does that come into play here?
Very directly. The nuclear issue is an issue, and there is the chance to have a compromise. There is a chance by parts of the Iranian government, by the way, parts only, and by decent, brokers in the West. There can be a solution, and there should be, for the sake of the people in Iran, and for more, cooperative security system in the region. That is necessary and even urgent. Otherwise, it can blow up by the Israelis, by Hezbollah, by the Syrian crisis, and so forth. So there is an international political need to calm down by a decent compromise in nuclear, and they can have it.
What about those who say that Ahmadinejad is actually letting this currency crisis continue because it serves as a distraction, and the focus is then no longer on this push for talks on the nuclear program?
No, I doubt it. This is a very irrational calculation if it's so, because
not everyone's a rational actor, though.
Yes, I know, but this distraction can be very soon self-destructive, as we can see in the first signs we have in Tehran and elsewhere in Iran. So I hope there are no leaders there who steer that kind of economic financial crisis up. It won't fit their own aims.
Well, let me pull
Expect they are self-destructive, and I hope not.
Okay. Let me pull in both of you and ask you what you think about, there's this chatter that's going on, too, that the currency crisis should be fed by more sanctions by the West so that the currency crisis turns into a political revolution. How does the world see that?
I think it wouldn't work. Up to now, we had the experience that if the attacks from the outside were stronger against Iran, it helped the country to gather around like some national position against the outside. I think that there are much more political frictions in Iran that anybody can imagine if we look at the media reports and other reports outside of Iran, what we read here. And I think that Iran simply needs time to be on its own to develop these frictions and then also go towards changes. I think it's also a problem because if we talk about external intervention, who defines when the interventions happen, how they happen, etc.? It's also a great danger because even if we not agree at all with Iran's politics, it's a regional factor. Iran is a regional and had a very rational role in international politics in the region during the last decades. The region has been destabilized already in a dangerous way, and it could be much worse.
Yeah, I just wondered, though, if under the current system there really isn't any room for any type of dissent to grow organically. So, I mean, isn't the only space that can be carved out there, isn't that going to come from outside intervention or from a currency crisis? The fact that people can't afford to go to the market and buy food that they need for dinner. I mean, is that...
If I put it bluntly, I'm against that kind of intervention. I'm against that kind of political revolution. But the outcome can so devastating for all, for the country and the whole region. So what I want to see more is a kind of, compromising capacities in the country for less human rights violations, for more hearing to the people's needs, to be more flexible in foreign policies, and there are chances for it. We have the reformist movement that are coming to the fore again, and we have signs of, we may have to to deal with the West also by elements of the government, of the regime.
I mean, you're a political scientist. Is the regime, is the system, the regime in Iran, is it one that can develop to allow room for dissent, or is it a system of all or nothing? Does it have to break down in order for something new to exist?
Were in the last years 100% or nothing.
Right.
But that's the policies. The system can be used for more flexibility and more civil society and for more decent, democratic interactions within the people and the government. It can be used. We have a kind of double system, the theocratic, religious one, and a democratic one. And it was always play between them and them. And if they are prudential enough, if they are clever enough, the regime will say, okay, we have to have more spaces for society, for economic rationality.
Yeah, maybe the rationality will come.
And the pressure from outside can be useful for that and can be destructive. So it's a balancing act. It has to be balanced.
Yeah, maybe it'll come to as the leaders there get old, because that takes us to our next topic, and of course that is something that we are all going to do.
It depends not only on age.
Yeah, right. It doesn't always bring wisdom, does it? But we all are going to get old, and they say now that the future belongs to the old. That is how you could describe the demographic trend for the entire world, as a matter of fact. The UN says that soon 1 out of every 5 people on the planet will be over 60. So the seniors are among us in full force. But it's not so clear that we want them hanging around. The UN's new report on aging says that the biggest fear of a majority of the older people polled is employment discrimination. So we don't want to hire them, and we can't afford to pay their pensions. The UN and our common sense tell us that some serious rethinking is in order.
A new United Nations report says the world urgently needs to begin preparing for an aging population. Many industrialized countries are beginning to grapple with the problem. But according to the UN, developing countries are also facing a time bomb. The elderly need more income security and stronger safety nets. And they have more health issues and require more medical care. And health systems cost money, a lot of it. Longevity poses challenges to society as a whole. So what's being done to prepare for tomorrow's older world?
Yeah, what needs to be done right now, Laura? I mean, the world is getting older, and it's almost as if no one wants to talk about it.
Well, it is not really true. I mean, we are talking a lot about it. At least in Europe, this is a very hot topic. It is also in the US, in Canada. I mean, we are already experiencing the problems of an aging population. What it needs to be done is that this topic gets an important topic, a relevant topic in developing countries, because they have the potential now to react. The situation in these developing countries, the demographic situation is so that they have a lot of people in working age, so they need to invest in these people so that they get good jobs, they get good savings, so that when they get older, they can have a good standard of life.
But are you saying that this is an interesting point? Should the developing world be preparing its workforce for a retirement that will not include social entitlements?
Exactly.
I mean, that's a strong statement.
Well, I mean, it has to be. We need still to define which are the ways. But of course, we need to push the people to save. I mean, especially in these countries, they have this high potential, this big potential of people in working age, they can save. These savings are also accumulated capital that can be translated into growth. So it's not just for them; it's good for the country. I mean, to have this capital to invest in other.
So the European way is not a model for the developing world.
Let's put it in this way. The developing world has the opportunity to react correctly. We are already too late.
Okay.
This is what I mean. I mean, they still have this demographical structure, which is an opportunity. We are already too old. You know, I mean,
let's talk about that. Let's talk about Japan, Germany. They, of course, they're on the forefront of this graying process. What are they doing to?
What are we doing?
Yeah, what's Germany doing? What's Japan doing? Are they doing anything right?
Yeah, well, I can tell you what Germany is doing. Of course, you're aware about this discussion about prolonging working life, and also to change the pension system, also to incentivize private savings and so on. It's not really easy because we have already a financing problem of the pension system, so it's difficult to deal with this. Furthermore, we have also these cultural problems to really push people to work longer, right? I mean, we are all aware that this is necessary.
But you're saying here people don't want to work.
No, I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say so. This is too much. I mean, we have here a good example.
But you had to take retirement at 65, and it seems it's almost arbitrary, isn't it? If you want to continue working.
I like the position of the Social Democrats. They put out that they say, okay, we have to be flexible in saying, okay, if they can't do it anymore, I can, but others can't because of illnesses and so forth. Then we have to react and have a decent living for their age. And to have a social flexible system that guarantees living in the aging processes.
Now, you're talking about Social Security.
Yeah, right.
For the retired people.
There has to be a basic of whatever there's in the debate, 800,000 or more, depends on the cost of living.
Should that
be the perspective.
Okay. I was in the United States last week and I was having a dinner conversation, and they're having this discussion there. There are people who want to change Social Security.
Of course.
And there are people who say Social Security should be an opt-out program. If you you should have the option of not taking Social Security when you retire. If you have enough wealth, then you should be able to say, I don't want the money.
That's not the problem. The problem is for the weaker persons.
Yeah, but we don't have that system here. And there are people who argue that if the wealthy did not take their part of the Social Security pie, then there would be enough money to help fund better the people who are poor in developed societies. I mean, it's a paradigm change in the way you look at Social Security.
If you look to United States, then I have a lot of questions to that.
Well, no, this is not something that could just be applied there. I mean, this was saying, ask people when they're 65 to lay out their wealth and tell you how much they're worth, and then you have a formula that determines whether or not you qualify for Social Security. Is that fair?
I would say we should start looking at it in a different way. First of all, how did these people accumulate the wealth? So we have to change the tax system, and they don't even have to get to the pension age with a huge amount of wealth. It has to be redistributed before. At starting point, I wouldn't say that we talk about how to adapt society to the needs of economy. I would say it's the other way around. We decide what we need, and it's absolutely everybody has the right to have a decent retirement, have health care, have social securities when he or she is old. So we have to see how to work and change the economic system that functions. The question is the kind of neoliberal capitalism we've been drove in by politicians and finance during the last decades cannot solve this question. It can just solve it by blaming the people and by making their lives miserable when they're old. So, and that's what millions of people are saying on the streets in Spain, in Italy, in Greece, in Portugal, all over. This system is not able to solve the question. So we have to go a few steps back and try to reshape what are the needs of society and what is the kind of economy that can fulfill these needs, and not how do we have to change people's lives so that they can serve economy.
All right. Well, I mean, Dario is he just gave his first campaign speech there. That's very good, Dario. But are we seeing, for example, in Spain, are we seeing the system break down that is not tending to the needs of the weaker parts of society? I mean, we're assuming here that the old are always weak, and that's not always the case. I mean, is that what we're seeing in Spain?
Well, I have different points there. If I may, I would say, I mean, you're right in certain points, but I think also potential if we give the right message to make people adapt somehow their lives. I'm not saying we have to make their lives hell, but being aware, if the people are aware of how how difficult it is to finance these systems, maybe they will be prepared to work longer. They will invest more in this training during the life course, and they will change this culture, and it will be not more like, no, at 60, this is my right to go in pension, and this is how it is. So
I'm being told that we're running out of time. We're going to have to wrap it up. But before we run out, to all three of you, at what age are you planning to retire? We're going to start with you, Dario. Very fast. What age? Do you have an age?
Well, I don't have any real pension coming. I haven't had. I just worked in a secure job for a few years. And I actually like political analysis, comments, activism, etc. I won't retire.
So you could, forever. And you're still working, aren't you, Professor?
Yes, I like that others also work, and that others say, I need not to work anymore, and I have a decent money to have a good living.
All right. And Laura, very quick.
In research, you never retire.
You never retire. That's how we like to hear it. You don't retire in television either. That is going to round out the agenda this week. Don't forget you can watch the show again online. You see our website address. And don't be shy. Tell us what you think about the show. Our inbox is always open. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. Thanks for stopping by. Join me next time when I set the agenda.